May I introduce Mr. Bruce Lawson?
I don't know what's happening here. Technology. Hooray. Thank you very much. Good night. I'm here to talk about responsive images because I kind of helped I kind of invented them, and now they're in all browsers. So I feel very proud, and they wanted me to talk about something. Specifically, new HTML thingies. I know that's a computer science term, and I apologize. The picture element, the source set attribute, the X descriptor, the W descriptor, and the sizes attribute. If you know all about this, feel free to get some beers in, bring me one, an Ursus, please. That would be nice. Thank you. And they're called responsive because, as you know, the dictionary definition of responsive is quick to react in the way that is needed, suitable, or right for a particular situation. So that's why we use media queries to make sure that the design responds to the situation, the size of the device we're looking at. But a lot of people forget part of the definition, quick. It's really important that these things are quick. Quick is part of responsive. 0.5 second delay is a 20% drop in traffic for Google. 100 milliseconds delay is a 1% decrease in sales for Amazon. 1 second delay causes 7% drop in conversions, Glasses Direct said. 5 second improvement in page load time is a 5 to 12% increase in revenue, said Shopzilla. Now, I'm not some mad capitalist, but I like earning money, and I like paying my mortgage. Actually, that's a lie. I hate paying my mortgage, but I like not sleeping in the street. So we need to make things fast, and one of the things that slows down the web is images. When I wrote this talk in April, this was the size of the average web page, not website or web app, 2.3 megabytes, of which 1.5 megabytes is images. And if we can make those smaller, they will load faster, and your site will load faster. But over the last 10 years, actually 6 years, this is from November 2010 to April 2016 of the Alexa top million websites, the number of image requests started off in 2010 at 50 per page. Now it's 56, not so much of an increase, but the page weight, the weight of the images has trebled. One of the reasons for this is before mobile was a thing, certainly in the UK, everybody got fast broadband, and so we didn't care anymore about the size of images. And also, one of the contributory factors was what we call retina displays. You suddenly got really great displays, so you needed to send really big images. But this is a problem because it slows down sites, and for many people, it costs real money. For an entry-level broadband package for mobile, it takes 1 hour's work at minimum wage in Germany. It takes 6 hours' work of minimum wage in the US, and in Brazil it takes 35 hours' work to afford a 0.5 megabyte monthly broadband package. So if you are making sites internationally and your images are not small and responsive, you are making some poor Brazilians and Nigerians work really hard, and that's not fair because these are real people. About 2011, I was at conferences like this, and about 5 different conferences, people came up and said, how can I make it so that I can send super good quality images to retina devices and lower quality images to e-ink readers, monochrome feature phones, etc.? And the answer is, you can't. Because the image element, the humble image element, has only one source. You can't give different sources. So I tried an experiment. I tried doing this. I've got an image. The ID is lovely. It's a picture of me in a mankini, hence the ID being lovely. And then I'm saying, if I'm a small screen, replace the contents of the thing that's got the ID lovely with a low-res picture. And this works. So do it, thank you. No, it works, but it doesn't do what you want. If you look at what's happening in the browser, it downloads both. We're not actually saving anything. We're doing a double download. Ignore the 0 bytes transferred, because this was local. But it will always download both versions if the media query is true. And the reason why requires us to look deeply inside the browser. We have to go under the browser hood. Not this hood, but I would point out the best browsers have a round O. We need to look really close to the metal at what browsers are doing. Gabby said that most people here have some kind of postdoctoral research in compiler optimization. Is that true? Put your hand up if you do not have postdoctoral research in oh shit. Okay, this is going to be pretty technical, so put your seatbelts on. Inside your browser is a magical fairy kingdom, okay? Living in this magical fairy kingdom are lots of lovable characters. There is the Unicode unicorn, for example. There is the JavaScripty pixie, there's the CSS sprite, there's the scalable vector goblin, and it's all ruled over by a benevolent browser fairy queen. Are you all with me? Not too technical? Cool. And the browser fairy queen, one of her jobs is to take the HTML you send and make a DOM tree. And the HTML you send is on the left. She will look at that and make a DOM tree. Actually, I've just realized this is a crap diagram because it should be HTML, then head, then body, then below the body there will be divs and spans, etc. Once this is made, once she's made this is entirely redundant. God bless you. This is entirely redundant. That's why when you look at a modern, heavily scripted page and you view source, the view source that you're looking at has very little to do with what you can see on the page. Because once the DOM tree is constructed, all the CSS and the JavaScript is applied to that, and that stuff is left alone. But sometimes it takes a long time to construct the DOM tree. So what the browser fairy queen does is before she even starts to make the DOM tree, she will read through your angle brackets. And immediately, if she sees an IMG, she will send one of her helper elves to the server to get that image, even before she starts making the DOM tree. And over a fast network, those images might have already been pulled in from the server before the DOM tree is even finished. And that's why, with my example, the pre-scanner, the helper elves, have grabbed the original image, the DOM tree is made later, the CSS is applied to the DOM tree, and then it says, oh, this media query is true, go and grab that replacement image. With the responsive images, you cannot do this in CSS or JavaScript, because CSS and JavaScript happen after the DOM tree is constructed. The only way to do true responsive images is in the HTML. And I mention this because usually people get angry at this point, like with Rachel's point earlier. We're going to have stuff in the HTML that is intimately tied up to the display. And there's no reason we can't do, there's no way that we can avoid that because of the pre-scanner. The pre-scanner, Steve Souders from Yahoo, Google, etc., the performance guru, he said, preloading makes pages load 20% faster. That's grabbing the images early. It's the single biggest performance improvement browsers have ever made. We don't want to lose this performance improvement, so we need to have fugly markup. And I'm sorry, and I regret it, but this is why. So I was thinking about this, and I wrote a book about HTML5. I wouldn't buy it. It's really out of date. But I remembered that we have a responsive element in HTML5. Not many people use this, and in fact, I think it's been removed from browsers now. But we have this ability to send a low-res version if there was a kind of media query in the markup. Cheers. So I thought, well, why don't we just reuse this and make responsive images? First of all, I invented an IMAGE element, an image element. But actually, according to the HTML5 specification, if you have an IMAGE tag, it just gets transformed into IMG by specification. So I thought, well, we'll call it picture. I wanted to call it Bruce, because I think, you know, after I'm dead, everyone will be typing in Bruce into their computers and summoning me like the Candyman. But I thought, maybe not. Maybe that's a little too egotistical. So I thought about this thing called the picture element, and just basically took that video element and wrote a blog post about it in November 2011. Cheers. And this was a terrible idea. And it could never have worked. But some clever people much cleverer than me, the Responsive Images community group, they realized there was enough in my idea that wasn't stupid to work on. So a guy called Wilto, Matt Marquis, a developer from Boston called Bookhoop, he took my idea. He'd been thinking along the same lines, just I wrote the blog post first, and he ran with this. Then a friend of mine who used to work for Opera, now works for Firefox, Marcos Caceres, he is good at writing specifications. So he wrote a spec. Mine was a blog post, and I can't write specs. So he wrote a spec. Tab Atkins of Google worked out how to make the syntax shorter, because it gets really long, and cover more edge cases. Vitally, Simon Peters, a colleague of mine at Opera, worked out how to make this both accessible by design and progressively enhanced out of the box. And crucially, a guy called Yoav Weiss, who works out of France, he was a freelancer, he knew how to code C++. So we had a funding round. We tried to raise $10,000 US so that Yoav could give up client work for 3 months to write the C++ code. And actually, we raised $15,000, so he wrote the code for both Blink, which powers Chrome and Opera, and WebKit, which powers Safari. And if nothing else, this is an example of the community getting together, writing a spec, funding a development effort, and getting it into browsers. It's in Chrome, it's in Opera, it's in Microsoft Edge, it's in Firefox, and most recently, it's even in mobile Safari. Yeah. A community effort, which is brilliant. You might ask why it's picture, not pic, because that would be shorter. The reason is, of course, it's an open spec, it's an open standard, this is open source, but you have a moral obligation, if you use this, to buy a picture of beer for me, Yoav, Simon Peters, Tab, etc. Obviously a joke that doesn't work in Romanian. Cool. Okay, let's look at the main use case, the first use case that we identified. How can we send a high-res image to retina displays and a normal image to non-retina displays? And we do it like this. And this was invented by Apple. We just nicked it and added it to the spec. Image SRC is your normal version. And note that every browser, Netscape 4, understands that, because every browser understands the SRC attribute on an image. Browsers that understand responsive images will read the SRC set, the source set. And if they have a 2 pixel density, that is 2 physical pixels for 1 CSS pixel, that is, they are retina, then they will probably grab high-res.jpg. In order so you don't have to repeat it, the 1 times, you don't need to write it, it will just take the SRC attribute. So, browsers that understand progressive images will read the source set. If they know they have high DPI, they can grab the high-res version. Browsers that don't understand responsive images will still get normal.jpg. Nobody loses out. In my original design, they would have lost out, but now nobody gets a worse experience. And you can chain these, so you can have a super res JPEG for browsers that have 3 physical pixels for 1 CSS pixel. Now, if you're looking at that, you're probably thinking, what happens for devices that have 2.5 physical pixels for 1 CSS pixel? Which one will they choose? How can you know? And the answer is, you cannot know. You will never know as a developer. And the reason is this. Is that clear? Some suites, a calendar, and the composer list. Everybody cool? Everybody got that? That's because you're not giving a command to the browser. You are giving a candidates list, okay? You're giving the browser a list of candidates from which it can choose, but you cannot tell it what to do. And that's because you are not the browser fairy queen. I'm sorry to break it to you all, but you are not magical fairies. The browser fairy queen knows far more about the network condition that this device is on right now, the device that it's on, the browser that it's on, and user preferences. So you tell the browser you can use any of these, and the browser will choose based upon what it knows. So for example, in Opera, you can always say, choose the lowest quality image. And regardless of what you as a developer say, you will give the candidates list. But if the browser knows that the user wants to save bandwidth and get a really low quality image, it will rightly grab the lowest quality image. Or the browser might notice that you're on a very bandwidth constrained environment right now and choose to get the lower quality image. You don't know this as a developer. The browser knows it and will choose the best one from the candidates list for now. The second use case is stretchy images. Traditionally, what we've done is this. You have said, here's an image, and then in the CSS, you said max width of 100%, and you might very well say height auto to preserve aspect ratio. And this works, but the trouble is that if you have a giant image and it's being squished down to fit on an old feature phone, and there are millions of old feature phones still in existence, that is wasting lots of time and lots of CPU cycles for the browser. Tim Kadlec quantified this on a test page with 6 times images. That is 6 times bigger than you expect the smallest display. The combination of resizes and decodes added 278 milliseconds in Chrome and 95 milliseconds in IE10, perhaps more, to display 10 images. So it's not only wasting time, but it's also wasting CPU cycles, and CPU cycles means battery. And it doesn't matter how great your site is, if your user's battery disappears because they're decoding your images, they will not come back to your site. So the second use case for responsive images is proper images, stretchy images. And we do it like this. Again, you have an image SRC for older browsers that don't understand responsive images, because nobody's allowed to lose out. Then you have the source set, and I've got 2 candidates here. Big.png, it is 960 pixels wide. Small.png is 240 pixels wide, and the browser will choose the best one for the current condition. you're giving a candidates list. And yes, this markup is completely tied up with the browser, with the size of the images. You can't get around that. We need to give the browser all the information it knows very early so the pre-scanner knows which one to grab as soon as possible. Originally, you'll see some early articles on a list apart, etc. They don't have the sizes attribute. This is now required by Spec. If you don't put it, it assumes 100 VW. And what this says is, dear browser fairy queen, grab one of those two images. That's the important information, how many pixels wide it is. You decide which one you want to grab and show it at 100 VW. That is 100% of the viewport wide. You can do this. This is a bigger example. I'm saying here are 4 different images. They are of those sizes. The browser is free to grab the one that it deems best right now. And the sizes attribute there says, if you have a screen wider than 640 pixels, show the image 60% of the viewport width. Otherwise, show it at 100% of the viewport width. And you can have as many of those media queries as you want. The order of them matters. The first one that is true wins. It doesn't read them all to evaluate. As soon as it finds one that is true, it will win. This is my favorite one, sending images of different formats. As of April, these are the formats on the web. 46 are JPEG, 23% are GIF, 0% are GIF, 29% are PNG. JPEG and GIF are old formats, and they're not terribly good. That is, they don't compress particularly well. But the reason, of course, is that only these three formats are common is because you can only rely on all browsers understanding those formats. But there are newer and better formats available. I like WebP. WebP is an open source format. It's based upon the codec that WebM Video uses. Google use it a great deal. In fact, I think Google use it for all of their websites except for Google Maps. And the reason they don't use it for Google Maps is because the tiles on Google Maps don't exist. They are made for you on the fly. And because WebP is super compressed, it takes 8 times longer to code a WebP than it does a JPEG. And that would make the tiles assemble too slowly for a seamless experience. WebP is such a good compression mechanism that from 2009, in Opera and the desktop and the mobile product, we have a mode called Turbo Mode, and we will transcode JPEGs and GIFs on the fly into WebP, because it's actually faster to transcode it into WebP and send the WebP to the client than it is to send the JPEG or the GIF. So this is really good. 26% smaller in size compared with PNG, and lossy images are 25 to 34% smaller in size. If you think about the average brochure website where you're selling products and you have really nice images, lots of images of different products, this is a significant saving already. But the trouble is you can only rely upon Chrome and Opera to decode WebP. What if you could send the right format to the right browser? Well, now, my friends, you can. I remembered that HTML5 video looks like this. There are 2 source elements. You're giving a MIME type, video WebM, video MP4, and you're giving 2 different formats, and the browser will choose the format it wants depending upon what it knows how to decode. And you need the MIME type because you can never trust file extensions. If you think about JPEG, you might have JPG, you might have JPEG, etc. So basically, we stole this and we made this. There's the source element is there with a source set. I'm giving tree WebP I'm saying it's a WebP style image. And the fallback, as usual, is a JPEG. So if IE6 sees this, it will grab tree.jpg. If Safari or the latest Firefox sees this, it will see the source element, but it knows that it doesn't know how to decode WebP, and it will fall back to the JPEG. But if a browser that does understand WebP sees this, it will grab the WebP, and there will be a significant size saving there. And I'm going to give you some real numbers from real websites in a bit. Note that the picture element doesn't actually do anything there. It's just a magical wrapper. Conceptually, what happens is all of the different things, the sizes, the W, the source set attributes, that controls what's actually pulled into the image element. The picture element is like a magical span. If you want to know what image the browser is actually showing, use current src in JavaScript. Another use case for which responsive images works really well is art direction. You'll be surprised to know I am not a designer, so I've never actually used this in anger. But it's simply satisfying this use case. You have the same image, but you want to crop it differently depending upon the form factor of the device. You can do this. We have a picture element, we have a source element, we have a media query, and then we have a good old-fashioned IMG with an SRC, so no browser loses out, but browsers that do understand responsive images on super wide screens will get the full shot. The markup for this is ugly, I admit that. You can combine all of these use cases into one giant picture element. It is really ugly to read, and it's ugly to write. The good thing is this is being built into lots of CMSs. So WordPress, which powers between 20 or 25% of the internet or the web, it has responsive images built into WordPress core. If you upload an image using the WordPress image uploader, by default, it will give you the markup, and it will generate different sized images in the back end and just add the src set out of the box. That's being built into Drupal, and there are generators available. I don't have a particular recommendation for one because I'm a WordPress user. But yes, we know this markup is ugly, and the reason it's ugly is we have to beat the preloader. Some guys from MobiForge who do M.dot websites, they did some research. They made a WordPress site with a 1 megabyte image and made it a 2.4 megabyte page because that's the normal size web page, as we've seen. They saw the non-responsive version was 1.1 meg, the responsive version was 268K. The cat image they used was 100 times smaller. It went down to 10K from a megabyte just by using responsive images. This is a significant saving. I dry ran a version of this talk in April, actually at a meetup organized by Rachel Andrews' husband, and a member of the audience called Mike Babb didn't know about these techniques. He used them at work the next day on a real live website that I can't give the URL for, I'm sorry. Just serving normal PNGs on a product-based website with lots of images. The weight of the images was 779K. By using the method to serve smaller versions of them to narrow screen devices, on those narrow screen devices, the size of the images cumulatively was 380K. When he served WebP, it went down from 779K to 480K. When he combined serving WebP to browsers that understand it and using the stretchy images to serve smaller sized images to smartphone, so he's using two different techniques in the same markup, it went down to 234K. That is big red numbers. He saw a 70% decrease in page size just by using responsive images, and that is significant. Let me reiterate, because responsive images require that you have an IMG element in there, and they require an SRC, nothing will show in any browser if you don't have an IMG. Nobody at all gets a worse experience than they do now. But people whose browsers do understand responsive images, whether or not they understand WebP, as long as they understand this new markup, you can expect to see 70% decrease in page size by using these techniques. And thus, they all lived happily ever after. But it wouldn't be a fairy tale if somebody were not looking into a magic mirror. So let's look at what the future might hold. There's something called client hints. I think this is a boring name, so I prefer to squish the name together and call these Clints. Be careful of kerning if you're writing this down, by the way. Client hints is a header that your browser can send to the server. You can opt into sending this header with this meta tag, and this meta tag says, hey server, I'm going to send you client hints. I'm going to tell you the device pixel ratio, that is how many physical pixels are to one CSS pixel, e.g. am I retina or not. I'm going to tell you the width of the device, and and I'm going to tell you the viewport width. And once you've opted in, your browser will send this to the server. You've got an extra header there. It's saying to the server, I have a DPR of 2, my width is 320. And then, regardless of what you ask for, maybe you just have an IMG element asking for normal.jpg, but you can program your server to send the right kind of file down. And this is great if you have control of your server, but not every front-end developer has control of the server. This is also, at the moment, only available in Opera and Chrome. Now, this is really exciting. This is a new image format. It's so new, it's still being developed, but it's completely open source. Free, lossless image format. And this is a super compression, super good compression algorithm. They are 14% smaller even than lossless WebP, which were 25% smaller than JPEG, than PNG, for example. But what's really exciting about this format is you only ever need to send one image because it progressively decodes. So when it's decoding, you'll get a lower quality version. If you wait a little while longer, it'll pull more information down the wire and it will progressively get sharper and more detailed. Thus, for every image, only one file is required ever. The FLIF image can be loaded in different variations from the same source file by loading the file only partially and thereby saving bandwidth. This is not ready yet. For example, they don't have an animated version yet. They don't have a lossy version yet, but it's being actively worked on, and this could be a solution in the future to avoid the ugly markup that I've been showing you. But for now, if you employ that ugly markup, you will see significant savings for your users, and that means real money. Thank you.